네, 자 이제 2025 김대중 평화회의 네 번째 세션을
Now let's begin with the first session of Kim Dae-jung Peace Forum. This forum is about new inter-Korean relations and peace on the Korean Peninsula. We also have a moderator and two speakers. This is the very last session so that you can learn a lot and get a lot of insight from our discussions. Let me introduce our moderator and speakers. Professor DAE Jung, the director of Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies, and Professor Eun-jeung from Free University of Berlin, Germany, and Professor Kim Gwi-ok from Hansung University. Moderator, the floor is yours. I am the professor in the political science at Yonsei University, as well as the director of Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies. President Kim Dae-jung has a lot of achievements across the sectors, across various subjects and times. When these achievements are assessed, there are the common keyword. This is peace. Peace through reconciliation. When he received Nobel Peace Prize, the Nobel Committee also used the word peace in assessing his achievements. That's why we have organized this peace forum. So you can see the universal theme of peace throughout all the events and occasions. In Korea, we have horizontal power changes. On the Korean Peninsula, there was the June 15th Inter-Korean Summit and the exchange cooperation and peace between the two Koreas. That is the grand achievements made by President Kim Dae-jung. And the ASEAN Plus 3 and Northeastern Asian relations were helped established by Kim Dae-jung's efforts. So Korean society, Northeast Asia, and the world, there you can find his footsteps across all the regions. So now we will review his values and the philosophies in achieving all these. In discussing his accomplishment, we always have to discuss this topic, new inter-Korean relations and peace on the Korean Peninsula, which has to do with the unification of two Koreas. I majored in the Korean foreign policies in relation with the Korean unification policies. As I studied and made research, among many presidents, Kim Dae-jung was interested in the peace on the Korean Peninsula and the deep understanding about inter-Korean relations the most. That's why he was able to achieve the grand success in inter-Korean relations through the summit, inter-Korean summit. So when the scholars are gathered, Kim Dae-jung is always on the table as a discussion agenda. And for that, we invited two speakers. The introduction was already written down on the handout. Our first speaker is Professor Eun-jeung. He received a PhD from the Göttingen University, and now he currently is serving as a professor at Free University of Berlin. He is a leading scholar of Korean studies in Germany. He studied political theory and the political relations. And she made great contributions for the policymaking. And regarding unification activists, she was awarded the National Merit Decoration of National Merit. So she will be talking about the Berlin perspective onto the Korean unification based on the German case, the Eastern Germany situation, and how West Germany prepared for unification, and how the people from East Germany went through the difficult process of unification and integration. From German perspective, there could be some lessons that we can take for our own unification. Our second speaker is Professor Kim Gwi-ok. She is serving as a professor at Hansung University. She actually studied social studies with the keywords of war, separated families, unification, civil society, labor, and many others. But the one keyword all this subject is coexistence and peace. So these two speakers are very, very fitting for our discussion. Kim Dae-jung studies and the division studies will also major her research area. So she will be assessing where Korea is lying in the current situation. This is a brief introduction of our session. First, let me invite Professor Eun-jeung. So you are given 20 minutes for your presentation. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Eun-jeung, working as a professor of the Department of Korean Studies at Free Universität Berlin, Germany. Thank you so much to organizers for inviting me as a speaker for this session. This is my second visit to Mokpo. 2 years ago, I came here for summer school in Mokpo with my students, and this year I came to attend this forum, and I don't have time to take a look around the town of Mokpo. But Mokpo is such a beautiful city, so I want to come back here again with my students. My topic is Berlin as a lens for dreaming peace on the Korean Peninsula. And Professor Jude said yesterday, when you talk about peace, you need to have a space to talk about peace. You need space to meet people to talk about the same topic. And we need creativity that can bring us beyond the differences. As far as President Kim Dae-jung is concerned, Berlin, I guess, was the space for him to talk about peace. He came to our university and he declared his sunlight policy at the Free University of Berlin. I guess Berlin served as a venue for him to dream about peace on the Korean Peninsula. That's why I titled my presentation as Berlin as Land for Dreaming Peace on the Korean Peninsula. President Kim Dae-jung and our university are closely connected, especially when you talk about Korea and peace. Please take a look at this. Take a look at this picture. It is preserved at the Presidential Record Museum. He came to our Henley Ford Grand Hall to give a lecture for 1,200 audience, and he declared his sunshine policy in 2000. But this exact space was used by John F. Kennedy, who visited Berlin 37 years prior in 1963. John F. Kennedy talked about the Cold War and the next steps forward. And President Kim used the exactly same place to declare his sunshine policy in 2000. Therefore, our university has fond memories of President Kim Dae-jung, and we are implementing a number of activities and events related to President Kim. This may not be well known among the Korean public, and in 2010, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the Nobel Peace Prize. And Egon Bao and another person, Mr. Lim, the former minister, came together to talk about the sunshine policy. And New East policy served as the one of the ideas to support the Sunshine Policy. The Egon Ba and the former Minister Lim sit down together to talk about the memories they had with the former President Kim. When we had this event in Berlin, all the ambassadors from different countries came to attend, but the only person who did not come of the diplomatic corps was the ambassador from the Republic of Korea. And just because we are holding an event related to former President Kim, there was an order not to access the free university. And then there were we made a complaint that you are not representing the current government, you are representing your country. Why would you put the access ban to our university? So that was just one event that I wanted to share. President Kim was recognized as a leader to promote peace. That's why our university continues to hold events related to him to remember his lineage and his heritage as the Nobel Peace Prize laureate. It is somewhat sad to see that his achievements and his works as the Nobel Peace Prize laureate are not fully recognized by everyone. And we hold annual lecture series on Kim Dae-jung, and the Korean Prime Minister and came to lecture, and the last Prime Minister of East Germany came to lecture as well. And many who remember former President Kim come to talk about their stories and memories made with former President Kim, and they come to talk about the Sunshine Policy declared by President Kim on our university campus, and that includes the last Prime Minister of East Germany, Lothar de Maizière. Now I want to talk to you about why did former President Kim choose Berlin as a venue to declare his Sunshine Policy? What does this city mean to him? Whenever we talk about peace, whenever we talk about inter-Korean relations, why do we cite Berlin so often? Why do we think Berlin as a special site? Now in Berlin is a unified, peaceful city. When Koreans talk about Berlin, they say Germany is not Korea, and Germany has enjoyed a peaceful time all along. That's why Germany was able to enjoy peaceful unification. But it was not always so. Back in 1961, these are the pictures of back then. And in August, there was a Berlin Wall erected. And it's the Brandenburg door is the door situated at the center of Berlin, and this is the most visited tourist attraction in Berlin. But this is exactly the place where the Berlin Wall was erected, and tanks were mobilized right before the construction of Berlin. These are the pictures of the time right before the Berlin Wall erection. I'm pretty sure you heard the name of the checkpoint Charlie, which is the checkpoint. In October, there was a moment where conflicts were heightened that might have led to the Third World War. There were U.S. forces on site as well. The Berlin also experienced times right on the verge of the Third World War, and the reason we were able to overcome such difficult times is because of the Willy Brandt, the mayor, back then mayor. the Willy Brandt becomes the Prime Minister of the unified Germany. And President Kim also said that he modeled Prime Minister Willy Brandt's East policy as the basis for President Kim's Sunshine policy. So Ostpolitik, which is the new Eastern policy, is the result of the public. Because on Christmas, the people living in West Germany, they wanted to meet their relatives living on the other side, and Mr. Willy Brandt made a request to the East Germany to let the separated families to meet one another. Even with the erection of the Berlin Wall in 1961, people were able to cross over the wall. For example, teachers who lived in East Germany, it was possible for them to go and teach in West Germany. But with the erection of the wall, suddenly the daily lives were changed. And on the Christmas Day of 1961, people living in West Germany were not able to meet their relatives living in East Germany. So Willy Brandt firsthand experienced the sufferings of separated families. That's why the Willy Brandt made a request to let people to meet one another. That's why he initiated discussions. Just as President Kim thought of a sunshine policy, Willy Brandt saw a big picture of new Eastern policy when he initiated discussions with East Germany, new Ostpolitik. He wanted to achieve something like sunshine policy. To Germans, Christmas is a very important holiday. Christmas is like a New Year holiday for Korean. It is very important for Germans to spend time with their family members and relatives during the Christmas holiday. And the discussions took about 2 years. And in October 1963, peoples living in West Germany were able to visit their relatives living in East Germany for 4 hours, not days, but only for 4 hours. More than 1 million people went to East Germany to meet their relatives just during the short span of window of 4 hours. This is the Potsdamplatz. Now, what is the meaning of Berlin to everyone? When we celebrated Nobel Peace Prize celebration, the Korean ambassador to Germany did not attend that event on our university campus. But in Germany and in the special message sent out by Berlin, division of two countries is not the line of death. It's not the line of severance or separation. It could be the line of connection, interconnection, and people-to-people exchange. There is a chance to turn that line of death and line of division into the line of something special. The Potsdamplatz was the Platz for death, but now it has been turned into a modern Platz. I think that is the message that is sent by Berlin. So what did Berlin, Willy Brandt, the then mayor, think when the wall was erected in 1961? Then Mayor Willy Brandt went to the States because Hallstein Doctrine was followed, and under the doctrine, no exchange or interaction with East Germany. They only wanted to interact with those in the West. But Willy Brandt made the first visit to the US, went to Harvard University to give a lecture, and met the John F. Kennedy, and his lecture was titled Coexistence was not an alternative, but it's the only chance for survival. That was the topic. If we cannot dismantle the Berlin Wall, at least we should allow people or establish a framework so that people can go to each other's side. So whenever we talk about the new Ostpolitik, we talk about the small steps, taking small steps. Of course, bigger steps, a large step is better than a small step. A small step is better than no step at all. That was the then mayor Willy Brandt's philosophy. Whenever he had an interview, he talked about how small steps can be better than no steps. So we call it as a small step politics. It's better than nothing. These did not just stop in words, but the then mayor Willy Brandt wanted to realize his thinking into policy formulation. In order to ease the pain and sufferings of separated families, he promoted small step policy. So his objective was to alleviate the suffering of Berlin citizens, for which pragmatic solutions were essential. They wanted two separately independent countries, East Germany and West Germany. But from the perspective of West Germans, Germany is only one country, and the West German government declared that when East Germans come to West Germany, they can have access to the same rights given to the West Germans. Whenever there are meetings among high-level officials, there could be many confrontations between officials in West Germany and East Germany. Therefore, title and naming are very important whenever high-ranking officials meet, and whenever they have discussions, they cannot allow the wording to be such as West German official meeting the representatives of the East German, because they don't want to recognize the official status of those who come to the negotiation table representing East Germany. One country or two countries, they didn't even want to talk about it, so they just did not mention about it. The reason that they did not mention was because they wanted to strike a compromise. The way to have a compromise and continue the discussion is agree to disagreement. The fighting could be endless if you fight over the differences. So they agree to an agreement to disagree. For example, access pass. Would it be 1 day or would it be 2 days? What I wanted to tell you is that they focused on pragmatic solutions, which turned into pragmatic policies. The policies that established in 1961 went all the way to the unification of two Germanys. That's what a former President Kim focused on. In Korea, what we do not talk about is pragmatic policies, small steps turning into bigger steps over the years. But we have to recognize that there are differences. What we are looking for, it could be different. It is important to have an agreement to disagree so that we can strike a compromise. That was the basic stance taken by Berlin. But this agreement to disagree is not much talked about here in Korea, and there are not many serious considerations regarding the agreement to disagree. Without talking about this, New Eastern policy and Sunshine policies would lose its light. And when former Kim Dae-jung thought about Sunshine policy, I'm pretty sure he paid attention first to the agreement to disagree. Even with the differences, it is still possible to talk to one another. That's why agreement to disagree should serve as the basis, as the starting point. However, in Korea, when people talk about the German experience and German unification, much attention was not paid to the agreement to disagree, which was recognized by maybe the former President Kim Dae-jung. Back in 1961, efforts began through small step measures, and agreement to disagree began back from 1961. What did it leave behind? The last Prime Minister, Hans Moderator, always talked about the outcome that came out of the small step policy. Just as former President Kim, and he wanted to find what he can contribute pragmatically. I asked him who is the closest person from the West Germany, and he said one politician, Egun Baha from the West Germany. How can it be possible? And were you always on good terms? And Hans Moderator said that he always met his friend from West Germany, so friends do not fight, he said. We never forgot that we are from one country. With the recognition of such thinking, we were able to unify two Germanys. In the late 1980s, there were discussions of two-country system, but still, there was always the perception that two Germanys are always coming from one country. And the last message sent by the last Prime Minister of East Germany, Hans Moderator, is that never forget that you are from one country. Now I am in Korea, and whenever I am asked to talk about peace and the German experience, and when I share my opinion, many people say, is there anything that we can learn from the German reunification? It happened a long time ago. But I do not tell them to learn from German experience. But I only encourage them to look into the German experience so that we can gain insights from such experience. What about this? Over 30 years, we organize a number of events and seminars and training opportunities to learn about the German unification. This is the walking trail where the stones were erected. This is right in the middle of the German city, and that walking trail is exactly where the Berlin Wall was erected. There are two rows of brick stones. Teachers from Germany and teachers from Korea, they walk on top of the walking trail while crying.
분단의 흔적이 이렇게 남아 있는
It is, I guess, somewhat overwhelming for participants to walk over the traces of the separated Germany. And the old wall, part of it was not dismantled and it was turned into a museum, and people are asked to push that wall just as an experience. And young people in Korea, they might say they are not interested in unification of two Koreas. But when I asked those in their 20s, when I asked them to walk over this trace of two separated Germanys, they have some feelings, overwhelming feelings. It could serve as the space where they can actually feel what it means to have two separated countries, why it is important to have people-to-people exchange and interactions. Even so, some scholars say that the German example has been a long time ago and nothing to learn from it, but I don't think so. Through the lens of Berlin, we can dream of peace and unified Koreas on the Korean Peninsula. This is one experiment that we conducted right before the coronavirus pandemic started. We invited students from North Korea to study together with students from South Korea. On the first day, the students from the Kim Il-sung University, they participated in the winter camp to study with students from South Korea. And South Korean students asked me, are we allowed to talk to students from North Korea? And I was very saddened. There are so many students from different countries. They were so enthusiastic to talk to other students in English, and they felt scared, or they were not sure whether they are allowed to talk to students from North Korea. And one South Korean university student said to professor from North Korea, "Can I have a handshake with you?" I thought that as if they were having encounter with an alien or something. But after 3 weeks, students from North Korea and South Korea, they were mingled together to have a group photo together to celebrate the last day of their winter camp. It was like having a casual meeting or a party. They were truly unified. And the picture right in front of the assembly, the Federation Assembly, not only students from the two Koreas but also from other countries came together to have a good time. It was only possible because they were in Berlin. Berlin is a space where everyone can mingle with each other without any worry or concerns. Yesterday, we talked about the island case. It is very important to have a space, to have dialogues. If we do not have such space, it will be difficult to talk about peace. So we need to create space like Berlin. Now that program discontinued because of the coronavirus pandemic, but if it is possible, we want to resume this program to invite many students from different countries. Thank you so much for your kind attention. While looking at the picture after 3 weeks, students from South and North Korea, we cannot distinguish them from one another. It's such a great photo. Thank you so much for sharing your invaluable insights. And there are still people who say that why should we learn from the German case because it happened a long time ago, you said. Everyone says we learned about the German unification case. We know about it. But when I give lectures and when I talk to my students, they think they know a lot, but they do not know much. I think that is kind of replicated in the political discourse in Korea. We are so accustomed to and familiar with the German case, but we do not know the specific details of the German case. We had many discussions, but we do not know the details. That's why the peace and unification on the Korean Peninsula has to be discussed in a continuous manner through continuous dialogues and looking back the lessons we learned from other countries. Thank you so much for your comment. And when we go to the checkpoint in Germany, it's a tourist attraction. But whenever I stand before that checkpoint, I think of those who sacrificed their lives to realize the unification of two Germanys. I am somewhat I always feel overwhelmed standing before the checkpoint. I look forward to the day where we can turn the DMZ into a tourist attraction point like Germany did. The German case has a lot of lessons for us to offers a lot of lessons for us to learn. We are running out of time, so I'd like to invite our second speaker.
네, 안녕하십니까?
Good morning,
저는
everyone.
한성대학에 있는
I am Gwi-ok from Hansung University.
안 띄워져서
My presentation is not put up
적대와
yet.
평화의 갈림길에서 새로운
My presentation
남북
topic
관계와
is the
한반도
road
평화의
to the
길
future of the
찾기.
Korean Peninsula at the crossroads of hostilities and
의도적으로
peace.
이 사진을 걸었는데요. 우리에게
I put this picture on purpose. It seems like the spring is behind the window. Or in reality, we are waiting for fall.
겨울로 가고 있는 느낌.
Now, but already we are waiting for the spring. However, we are still in the winter time, so I would like to find a way to go to the spring. This is the demarcation line. 75 years ago, this demarcation line was up. This is not existent anymore. Thanks to President Kim Dae-jung, I crossed the demarcation line. Thanks to President Kim. I rode the boat from Donghae City and arrived at Kumgang Mountain in North Korea. At that time, the pilot of the boat, the captain of the boat told the bell when we passed the demarcation line at sea. He announced that this is the demarcation, marine demarcation line. On the armistice statement, there was no mentioning about the demarcation line. However, the demarcation line is in our mind. When we cross the line, the South Korean people on the boat moved to the guardrail of the boat to listen to the bell and looked at the demarcation line on the sea. Thanks to the President Kim, we were crossing the demarcation line. One person started to cry at the moment. So that demarcation line was a vivid reality in our mind. So after crossing the demarcation line, we could sail into North Korea. The Kim-gu was in the borderline. In 1989, student Im Soo-kyung crossed the demarcation line into North Korea. She returned to South Korea. Of course, she went to North Korea via Berlin. In 1998, with the Kim Dae-jung administration, chairperson of Hyundai Kim Jong-Young marched into North Korea with a herd of cattle. It was very emotional and encouraging moment, and he talked about why the head of the cattle should be 1,001 in terms of head count. It was very emotional, amazing moment, and finally, June 15, 2000, we vividly remember this photo. All the nations shed the tears. On that day, I promised with my friends. We asked whether the two Korean leaders would be shaking hands or hugging each other. So my friend said that the two leaders would exchanging hug. But I thought they will exchange handshake because I thought I knew President Kim's mind. Maybe President Kim Dae-jung wanted to give Chairman Kim a hug, but he did handshake. And when I read his biograph, he confessed that he was very fearful of having this event. And he thought that if he really met the North Korean leader, he could be labeled again as a red communist. It was his real compassion described on his autobiography. And he even discussed this concern with the chief of the Korean CAI. And after the summit, a lot of processes were played out, which were very significant. But without this photo, nothing would be possible that happened afterwards. And this year, we marked the 80th year of division. Many people shouted that we have to overcome the hostilities. A few days ago, a Korean president went to UN and talked about the END initiative, END initiative. I wonder whether this is a real solution to end the animosities on the Korean Peninsula. That is the very prelude of my presentation. My students asked me this question: why after the World War II, why Korea was divided, and why other the past colonial states were not divided? Why Korea became the only country which had suffered the division? Why Korea? And to that question, I show up this photo, the map. This is the map drawn by Japanese people. It's the very original copy of a great Eastern Japan. If you see these lines, then Korea was the cross point of meeting Soviet Union and the United States. In 1948, Kim-gu crossed the demarcation line, and until now, the division persists. However, there are as important efforts to overcome the division. Of course, we are having the internal division, internal fragmentation within our society. Some people say the unification is not necessary. However, there are many efforts to overcome the division. Post-Cold War period, a lot of efforts went on. Mr. Yoon was one of them, and Mr. Yoon has to do with Professor Lee, and Yoon made the unification movement in Berlin. In our history, there was a joint statement announced in 1972 and 1991. Basic agreement between two Koreas were announced. They are the efforts for unification. And in 2000, June 15th joint statement was announced. And after that, until 2007, we experienced a happy period, golden period of reconciliation and cooperation. And that period period has to come again and solidified. However, from that golden time is not visible at this moment. July 1st, 2000, President Roh Moo-hyun visited North Korea, met with the chairman Kim Jong-il, and the two leaders agreed on the peaceful Korean Peninsula. If this vision is realized, then we would not have other tragedies that had happened after that event. It shows, depending on the behaviors of the leaders, the real situation could be changed. Depending on the efforts, we may go through this tragedy. After those golden period, we saw great changes involving tragedies. And finally, 2023, Kim Jong-un announced that the unification is not an option. So two Koreas will be as business as usual on the Korean Peninsula. From these two hostile Korea's situation, can we survive in peace? Even though the two Koreas are not interested in unification, can the two Koreas survive on its own? Currently, we are suffering from the climate crisis and the global crisis. How can we overcome all the consequences stemming from the division? So how can we pass down this situation to our next generations? The North Korea first mentioned the hostile to Koreas. However, internally in South Korea, the hostilities are very much alive. This is well known to us, so I just briefly touch this topic. And during the golden period, a lot of South Korean people regarded North Korea as a partner for the cooperation. However, that sentiment turned negative. It is comparison before 1995 and after 2000. So when the inter-Korean conflict arises, then the South Korean opinion turns negative toward North Korea. And we went through that experience, and that is also proven in the survey, opinion survey. And what about among the younger students? They are not very different from the grown-ups. According to our survey, their sentiment is not very different from the survey among adults. And about the sense of unification, people say that there are some changes in the unification-oriented mind. In 2018, there were possibilities of amicable relations between the two Koreas. Of course, overall, the animosities of hostilities were rising. However, people's mind could be quickly changed when there is a important or significant event. And the young people, our young students, approach unification with more flexible mindset. But you can see that there are more students who say the unification needed than the adults. Then that is very different from the current generation. The older generation said that the unification is needed for the economic reason, but the younger generation, next generation, said that unification is needed because we want to live in peace. So when we look at inter-Korean relations, we have to reflect upon ourselves in the situation when North Korea announced hostile to Korea. So at the moment, I believe we need to think about why hostilities are so intense. From 1945 through to the Korean War, a lot of casualties and damages have done on people. 10% of the total population on the Korean Peninsula were sacrificed. That clearly shows how bad warfare could be, even in this 21st century. Two Koreas are not just a hostile state. The 1953 is not the end point of the Korean War. After that, because we saw a lot of small-scale collision and confrontation between the two Koreas. So the confrontation led to the arms race, and Korea is recording the lowest birth rate in the world. So arms race should not be an option for our generation and the next generation. Through the fundamental reflection on our situation, we have to think about whether we regarded North Korea as a true partner when we discuss peaceful unification. The peaceful unification was the peace without war. During the 1990s, after German unification, Korea have been talking about the unconditional aid to North Korea or assertive unification. So at the time, we had to ask ourselves a very fundamental question: do we really need unification? When North Korea in dire hunger situation, South Korean people said a fearful statement that the beggars are coming to us. The famine was so severe in the north, and the South Korean people always mentioned the high cost of unification. Why should we feed the hungry people in the north? If I am a North Korean at that time, I would deny unification because the statement from South Korea would damage my pride as a North Korean. President Yoon even said that I cannot give 1 cent to North Korea, a nuclear developing country. And when we say North Korea support or assistance, our media always talk about unconditional aid would not be helping South Korea. Under situation, we always talk about the benefit of unification. However, unification is more than just a benefit, economic benefit. The 80-year-old division has been always used for political decoy. So unification became a maneuvering tool for politicians, and it was, for example, used for the May 18th democratization movement. At that time, I was a student in school. I thought that North Korea really attacked Gwangju. That would be the same understanding among other ordinary Korean people. Let us look deep into history. In my original paper, there are more details. Then now we have to think about why North Korea started to develop North Korea. The nuclear weapons is the beginning of demonizing North Korea. I use the AI and write this in the prompt. Is nuclear weapon the cause of division or the consequence of division? It said the nuclear development of North Korea is a consequence of division, it said. That means we need a different perspective of dealing with North Korean nuclear weapons. Even machines know the answer, so the cause and the result should not be confused in our minds. When we talk about unification and inter-Korean dialogue, we say if you open and if you denuclearize, and South Korea will give many things to you. But that was nonsense according to Kim Dae-jung. Kim Dae-jung's sunshine policy is about unconditional dialogue. That was the very beginning of change. In 1999, he knew this already, and he developed this perception for a long period. In 1999, he proclaimed that he would start dialogue with North Korea without any condition. So dialogue was very important because it creates the other circumstances, very different circumstances from the past. So when we think of Kim Dae-jung, why we think he is great? He's not because he is a great politician. However, but he risked his life in pursuing something, and he was very persistent based on the time accumulated policy execution. Professor Lee already mentioned that in 1972, two Germanys agreed on the basic pact. That was commitment, binding commitment. But two Korea's agreement or commitment can be broken at any time by different government. So the promise or commitment should be legally binding. So we need to create irreversibility in any kinds of commitments when it comes to inter-Korean relations. So we may change the election law or take some measures. So when we make a promise, that promise has to be realized. Even though President Lee say a lot of beautiful words, that words has to be translated into the action with the binding, based on the binding foundation. In South Korea, power change is the part of the system. Germany, when the basic agreement made in 1972 remained valid until the very end, even though there were power changes. Different governments always honor the basic agreement. So consistency is very important. That is the lesson that we have to learn from German case. In order to build a peaceful peninsula, I want to argue for the principle of party autonomy. A couple of days ago, when President Lee met with President Trump, he said, "You become the peacemaker. I will be the pacemaker." That is very beautiful words. At the moment, we cannot be the peacemaker. However, even though we take the role of pacemaker, our mind should be set at peacemaker to address our problems on our own. This because the peace on the peninsula is our problem. External forces can be helpful but cannot be the direct solution for our matter. To end the hostilities, that maybe the current administration would not have enough capability or time. Anyway, nevertheless, the current administration has to make efforts in that direction. Otherwise, the pain and suffering of the Korean people would continue. So primarily, the joint military drill has to be stopped. Maybe it could be difficult, maybe it is impossible, but I don't think so. During the Nomuyan administration, we saw the possibility of stopping the joint military drill. Back then, the Korea-US military drill was needed. So President Nomuyan invited North Korea to observe the US-Korea military drill because military drill is essentially needed to secure, to have a security on the Korean Peninsula. Of course, if military drill is not necessary, that would be the best. However, anyway, we need the joint military drill, so he cleverly invited all the stakeholders of the Korean Peninsula to observe the joint military drill. That could be one possibility. And with the September 19th military accord, that the purpose of the accord was to build peace on the Korean Peninsula without war. So that pact has to be transformed into the military agreement. During the pandemic, to mark the 75th foundation of Labor Party, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un shed tears in front of the people in the face of the tragedy. I was also sad by looking that scene. If inter-Korean cooperation was promoted, then those sad scenes would not be shown. And the reconciliation or peace on the Korean Peninsula would have very peaceful or amicable ambience on the Korean Peninsula. Now, we cannot talk about 2+4 diplomatically. However, actually, South Korea may take an initiative to convince other powers to join the peace-promoting efforts. Back in 2000, when President Kim Dae-jung announced the joint statement, the other parties were involved in that process. So all the stakeholders, countries have to be involved in addressing issues on the Korean Peninsula. In this, the social and cultural efforts should not be dismissed. Fake news is widespread, and deepfake may be used to produce fake news and false information. When the inter-Korean relation turns for the better, then some people may create fake news or misinformation to hurt the good relations between the two Koreas. So we need to create a virtuous ICT environment, and unification education should be diversified. Rather than talk about hostilities, we need to talk about for the better. So multicultural environment, multicultural ambience should be established. When UK agreed on the Black Friday agreement, there was a lot of peace education for the society. So the kind of civic education should be benchmarked and imported for Korea's sake. And one thing I still vividly remember is the college students from the south and north gathered on Kumgangsan mountain. I saw that the students from two Koreas holding hands, they did activities together. It was very good moment. So those gathering created a lot of emotions and very impressive. So the kind of scenes have to be created more often and more frequently. So we have to say that this is the future for your generation. We need to present that vision for the younger generation. And with that, we need to address issues regarding Korean diaspora and the separated families and North Korean defectors as well. So when we work together, we can do a lot of good things. I asked again to chatbot. I asked, can Lee-jae-myung and Kim Jong-un handshake, and can two leaders work together on the beach of the Galma, Wonsan? So one day, I imagine we may have Kim Dae-ju Peace Forum in Wonsan, Galma. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. 70 years have passed since the division. So citizens, the people in the south and the north have changed their time passed, and different generations are populating in each side of Korea. The professor pointed out that what would be the real preparation for the unification. When we say unification preparation, people say money. However, there are more essential, more fundamental preparations for unification in terms of culture, society, and politics. And thank you for the presentation. Now it is time for us to entertain the questions from the floor.
While you think of your question, let me ask my question then. Just like Professor Kim said, Korea's North Korean policies are structured, and I guess that is because of the nuclearization of North Korea. And people say denuclearization needs to come first for us to give assistance and aid to North Korea. And there aren't the UN sanctions imposed on North Korea. That's why our approach is structured. The Lee Jae-myung administration should be the same. Without the substantial progress on denuclearization, the assistance and support shall be given, and this system is likely to continue. And what Professor Kim said that denuclearization first is our approach, but should we do nothing until North Korea does something? Or should we create an environment so that North Korea decides to go for denuclearization and then the assistance can follow? Should we just wait for denuclearization first, or should we create an environment or do something to encourage North Korea to move toward denuclearization? I agree with your comment and thought on that. And when Professor Lee made a presentation, there was a 10-year anniversary of Nobel Peace Laureate awarded to President Kim. There was an access ban on ambassador to Germany not to attend the event. It is somewhat saddening to see. But our North Korean policy always is being criticized by the incumbent administration because it was established by the previous administration. That's why we have to look at the philosophy and think again about the philosophy of President Kim, because President Kim created a turning point and made a significant progress. He didn't propose a unification policy. He said he will succeed the unification policy established before. Every time there is a change in the administration, they want to put a label on the North Korean or unification policy. But while President Kim said that he will continue and uphold the unification policy that was established by the previous administration, even though it was made by the Conservative Party, but still, one unity, unification policies are being succeeded because of the determination made by President Kim not to overthrow everything that was made by the previous administration, but he decided to continue and succeed the policies related to the unification as they were. It's not about having handshakes or talks, but it's about having what kind of view should we have when we talk to North Korea and what should be our way forward. President Kim proposed a direction forward. That's why we were able to have an inclusive policy when it comes to North Korean matters. And that took deep roots in our society because of his engagement policy toward North Korea. As I said to you at the outset, out of any presidents, out of any administrations, his understanding regarding the policy toward North Korea has been deeper than anyone before. Now the North Korean leadership by Mr. Kim Jong-un is making fun of our policy toward North Korea. And many people say that conversations between the two Koreas have been severed because of the mockeries that are being made by North Korean leader. But still, we are not getting into an extreme case. That is because fine-tuned approach now being shown by the incumbent administration. But this is all attributable to the great commitments and achievements made by our former President Kim Dae-jung when it comes to the engagement policy toward North Korea. Now we have a question from the floor. I'd like to share my comments and also make a proposal to the government. There are many North Korean defectors, hundreds of thousands of them, and they tend to be conservative. We sacrifice for the well-being of the North Korean people and for the country. So at the national level, the Korean government, we cannot run in a marathon from the very beginning, but we should start taking baby steps, like small steps. We have to take a bottom-up approach to remove the 38th parallel line on the Korean Peninsula, so that we can make contribution to removing the armistice line. So we need to take specific measures for North Korean defectors. But North Korean defectors think that because they are conservatives, we are presenting our assistance to North Korea for the sake of North Korea. It will be important to have a training or educational seminar to educate North Korean defectors that we are sending over our assistance for the sake of the peaceful Korean Peninsula, not for the sake of North Korea only. The military coup was stopped by the small steps taken by our people, and we look forward to a seminar on desirable unification, and it can be educated only through education and seminars. I'm not part of the incumbent administration, but just like you said, there is a presidential advisory to the president. The official name is National Unification Advisory Council, NUAC. And 22nd council will be established soon at the end of this year, and it is chaired by the president, and there will be chances for the public to make proposals or recommendations and suggestions. Any of you who are part of the NUAC, please take a hard comment into your mind so that it can be shared.
그래서 다 보수를 하셔서 왜 보수를 다 하냐 그랬더니
So
남한에서는 정은이 편을 다 들었기 때문에 아니래요. 그래서 보수에 저기 할 수밖에 없다고 그러시더라고요. 그래서
North Korean defectors said
이렇게 진보적으로 성향을 완전히
that
반대하시더라고요. 그래서
North Korean defectors are typically against the policies by the Liberal Party. That's why I made this suggestion. But the Korean society is very diverse, conservative, and liberal. And the North Korean defectors have a very mixed thinking and diverse stance. So they are not always conservative.
아니 보면 알지 않습니까? 적절한 이 상황이 어떠한가, 북한 주민들을 위해서 활동해야 되는가 아닌가에 대한 의식은
They always keep in mind what they could do to contribute to the better well-being of North Koreans living in North Korea. And not all of them are from the conservatism, but many of them show progressive sentiment as well. But this is something that we need to pay attention to. Thank you so much for sharing your comment.
있으신가요?
Is there any other question?
예, 시간이 지금 저희들 배정받은 시간이 12시 20분까지.
We are running out of time. We are asked to
오후 세션
end our session at 12:20.
주제라는 오후 세션은 이것으로 마무리하도록.
So this will be the end of our session with the topic of the new inter-Korean relations and peace on the Korean Peninsula. Thank you so much for your attendance.
자, 이렇게 준비된 모든 세션이 마무리가
This will be the end of our session 4. It was very meaningful. We were able to listen to the presentations made by two professors.
참가자 여러분들께도 감사의 인사를 드리겠습니다.
Thank you so much for your participation.
시간입니다. 이 호텔
Now,
2층 첫 번째
we will have
레스토랑에서
lunch,
오찬이
and today's
준비가
lunch is
되어
prepared
있습니다.
at the
참가자가
Topaz
많아서
restaurant on the first floor of the hotel. As many participants are attending, there may be a long waiting line, so we kindly ask for your understanding to bring the lunch coupon you received at registration when entering. We will reconvene here at 2 p.m. after lunch, and after lunch, starting at 2 p.m., the Youth Peace Roundtable will take place, followed by the Kim Dae Jung Academic Award and Thesis Award ceremonies. Thank you so much.